Welcome back. This is the Lightforge podcast. I'm Adwicta.
This is Merps. Hello. We're gonna talk a little bit about Arena. Not that we have been playing much Arena. I personally haven't. I played a lot during the first week, but I think we should talk about Arena because I think it needs to be talked about. Certainly, talking about it is better than playing it these days. So we will. We'll talk a little bit about it, but more specifically, because look, if you ask people, I think people are very frustrated. Um, I think it's important to identify why something is bad or feels bad, because once again, I think from previous communications with Blizzard, there is a sense from Blizzard that, like, oh, the goats just complain a lot, and the arena community will just always find something to sort of complain about, and they're just kind of angry. Like, they're like, oh, these arena people, these duels people, these wild people, like, they'll just, like, never be happy. So let's break it down. Let's break it down into categories. Let's talk a little bit about it. But first, it might be helpful to just get a meta snapshot. So
Okay,
let's
so
talk
so
about
first
that.
things first. From what we talked about last week, nothing's changed. There's no patch. There's no hotfix. Epic bug is still in. The meta's still the same as it was before.
Yeah. Let's go through the win rates really quickly, just to see what is new. And right now, Mage is not number one, but really the top three classes are within 1 percentage point of each other. So number one, we have Paladin at 53.7%, Warlock at 53.2, Mage at 52.9. Demon Hunter is kind of close to them at 51.5,
Demon
and then
Hunter has
there is
been number
a
3, number 4 the entire time.
yeah, and then there is a clear gap between Demon Hunter and the next tier, which is Druid, Rogue, Shaman, which is hanging out within half a percentage of each other at
Mm-hmm.
47%. And then you fall a tier below that to Hunter, and then Priest and Warrior is
Guys, don't play.
stabilizing
Don't
at 38%.
don't
Stabilizing.
play. Don't play those. Don't
I
play
thought
Priest.
I thought Warrior was going to go down to like 36, maybe even like, closing at 35, but it's stabilizing.
Yeah,
So good job, guys.
you can't drop that far. At a certain point, it gets really hard to keep losing that much. Like the RNG is just gonna help you win a couple games.
Yes. So that's where the meta is right now. And let's talk about what are the problems. Let's go beyond the stats, because if you look at a meta, I think most of us will agree there have been better metas in which the top class has a higher winning percentage, right? You might look at this and you're like, okay, Merps, if we just take away, some of the worst classes, let's just take away Warrior, let's take away Priest, and then you have Paladin at not 54% yet,
Mm-hmm.
and then Hunter at higher than 44%.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
And if you
we
take
don't
away
want
Hunter, it's 47 to 54, basically, right? Like it's a
right.
very tight band for what Arena's
So
used to.
unless you get absolutely screwed, as in you get Hunter, Priest, Warrior as your choice, you get Shaman, and you're like, okay, it's a 47% win rate class when the highest is 53. That's not so bad. But there is a reason why people just across the Arena HS, your favorite Arena streamer, whoever that might be, they're very, very frustrated. And I think a lot of people are saying this is potentially, if not definitively, the worst Arena meta ever. So let's break
This
down.
is not the worst Arena meta ever.
Eh,
This is not the worst Arena meta ever. If you're talking
what is
about
your
metas,
opinion on the worst one?
like just I'm gonna throw a lot of them out there, but basically anything that they fixed in 2 weeks was worse than this. Like think of the Hunter
So
secret,
something,
like the
the
Hunter,
Hunter secret meta. I
like
remember that.
so many, right? Like the thing that people aren't mentioning them is because they were clearly bad metas and they were clearly going to be fixed and they were fixed, and it is unclear if this meta is going to be fixed. I think people are like advancedly focused on that, even though there's been metas that lasted like 3 weeks that are way worse than this one. But those metas were everyone was just kind of sitting around being like, "Hey Blizzard, when are you going to fix it? Hey Blizzard, when are you going to fix it?" All the while knowing that Blizzard was going to fix it at some point.
No,
This
it's
one, I
true.
don't know.
Uh, as we've talked about before, TN, the micro adjust person, and really, it seems like one of the only people, if not the only person, working on Arena left, and we don't have adjustments
Yeah,
now.
but the
It
adjustments don't matter, right? Because like we said, the class win rates are basically good.
right. The problems that stem, like the problems with this meta, are indeed different, and
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about it a little bit. So number one, the thing I wrote down is the difference between what cards, the good cards, and your average card slash bad cards, because your average card is a bad card, really,
Yes.
is very big now, and I've said this last week as well. I say it during the streams. A Knight Captain hitting these days is more impactful than a Knight Captain hitting in the previous meta. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
call that the Skullomance meta, because really Skullomance had its fingerprints everywhere in that meta. No, it wasn't the newest one, but so much initiative, so much smoothness in kind of the quality of card that you could either draw or generate from your deck, because that's what Skullomance is all about. And these days, oh man, how many times do you play a 4 mana 4/4? Right, quite a decent amount.
Mm-hmm.
6 mana 6/6s with like no effects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that happens a ton, right? Like it's like I don't know how many times I was forced to draft and also play that 6 mana 6/6 dirigible, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
thing, because it's like, okay, I could pick that, or what? I'm picking Worgen Greaser. Like, I'm not picking Worgen Greaser. Am I picking the 1 mana Trog thing? I mean, maybe sometimes.
I see the one mana Trog thing
No,
everywhere.
I will sometimes pick it,
People
but
are picking it.
sometimes it's way too small, right, for me. So I'll
Uh-huh.
pick the 6 mana 6/6 instead. That's what the meta is right now, and I will play my understand, like a 6 mana 6/6 was bad even since like the start of Hearthstone. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not just talking about 2022 bad. We're talking all time bad.
And that's what
But
happens when you bring in four old sets that are old.
that is what happens. Yes.
Like people
So
remember, I remember before the sets came out, people were like, "Oh, MSG, that was a power spike." It's like the top cards were a power spike. 80% of that set was not a power spike at all. And people just remember the ridiculous cards, and they didn't remember that most of the cards were pretty unplayable in this meta. And now we're in this meta, and all the unplayable cards are in the pool, and then we're drafting all of them. And you think this looks bad? Wait till they fix the epic bug. If they ever fix the epic bug, it's gonna get worse. Like in terms of your card quality.
yes. And what happens when the difference between good cards and your average card is so wide is that a lot of the times it just comes down to who does play that good card first. And once again, we're not even talking about the Ysairas and the Onyxias. We're just talking about Knight Captains here, right? Who gets to play that Knight Captain first to get a lot of good value, and then afterwards you're like, oh shit, I am so behind. I don't have the fishy flyers to come back anymore. I don't have the smug seniors to like, stall, right? That double smug senior that was so freaking good at just kind of like holding you down in the late mid game. I don't have that anymore. And then, of course, some classes have something close to it, which is why they are the way that they are. And you kind of just get rolled over. So that is one of the problems. And like, you also, put in this sort of general feels bad, right? And we'll talk about like why these things feel bad, because everything that I list today will feel bad. Nobody wants to play uh just vanilla minions with no initiatives anymore. It's like, this isn't 2015 Hearthstone, in which that's sort of the expectation. Uh People are used to that Skullomance kind of playstyle, in which it's like, okay, I could either play my fishy now or I can play my fishy later and then delay a little bit. These days, a lot of the times with a lot of decks, you just don't have a choice. I'm just playing these vanilla minions. I don't even have a choice of do I use my initiative or not. And the people that are able to even have a choice, well, they are already inherently at an advantage, right? It's like they have the Knight Captain, they have like the Firelands Portal. Oh my gosh, that's such a huge difference maker. And then let's go to problem number two, which is the deck by itself is more polarized than ever before. Your quality is more concentrated in a fewer slash certain number of cards than ever before. So the smoothness I was talking about in Skullman's, right? It's like, okay, like what's the quality of my deck in, right? Some is in the fishy, some is in the smug senior, some is in all of these cards. I can have some draws and everything. If you've drafted a lot in this meta, you'll know that even for the above average decks, like significantly above average decks, is it because your average draw, like, per draw, if I say you get like a mulligan, right? How good is that going to be? Disregarding curve, right? Disregarding curve. How good is the quality of those cards going to be? It's all over the place. As in, you could draw your Onyxia. Maybe you drafted it, right? You could draw something very, very good. And you could just end up with 3 mana 3/3, 6 mana 6/6s. That could happen. So that's something that we also see. Even the average, above average decks, it's not this like nice little bell curve or anymore. I'm not saying it was exactly like that before, but it's much further apart now, in which even the pretty good decks, it's being held up by 2, 3, 4, maybe a little bit more, really good cards. And then you also have the shitty cards that bad decks have, like the absolute shit tier cards. So both of you guys have that. You're just hoping to draw and be able to play one of your really good cards. And if you are able to play that really good card when you're facing the, just average decks or kind of like shitty decks, right? You probably win because that's such a huge swing. Those decks don't have it. But what does that depend on? That depends on you drawing it. That depends on you, with your shitty cards, being able to survive until then. And, we're getting into part of the reasons why the win rates for the class is like, nobody is running away with it, right? And is Mage very good? Yes, Mage is very good. Warlock is very good. Like, it feels, especially when you get to high wins, you're like, wait, Mage is busted. Warlock is busted. Why haven't they broken? Why has no class broken 54%? And it's because even the good decks now are inconsistently very good, or less consistently good than decks were before, in which they smooth it out with like, okay, a pretty good 3/4, and then a fishy, and then you have all these things. And now it's just like, well, shit, like I have the Knight Captain and they don't, but it's in my deck, so I don't know. Like, we're just kind of battling like crappy vanilla drops until then, and maybe they have a slightly better swing. Their bomber RNG goes a little bit better. Maybe they just went first, and that was just really good with all of the shitty cards that we have in our decks. So that is one of the main issues as well. Like, even the above average decks, and you see this in streams, I've experienced it myself. I draft a deck, I'm like, okay, I know this is above average compared to the meta. It goes 2 wins. You have seen it through like all of the streams. I have experienced it myself. I have like 1 in 3 decks where I look at it, I'm like, this was good, but it's good if you just average everything out. If you just average out sort of like, oh, the average tier score of all of these is such and such. But if you look at all the individual scores, it's like, all right, well, below average, really below average, Raid Boss Onyxia, which, brings up everything significantly, and then crappy, average, pretty good, and then maybe like a Firelands Portal, right? And you're like, oh, shit, that's like really good.
And remember that all of this is RNG, like strict RNG. Whether you draw a card or not, you can't be better at. All players draw cards randomly. So when good decks still have this additional RNG built into it from these bad sets, and this kind of just this really wide difference between what a top neutral is and what your like 3 worst neutrals are in your deck. When there's that big of a gap, that is just the element of RNG being inserted in a heavy way into every one of your matches. And as we know this about strict RNG, like, and I say strict, this isn't even bomber RNG, right? There's no way to set it up. There's no way to do whatever. Good players get punished. Your bad players are not going to lose as many wins as good players do in this kind of meta. That's why the people that you see the most frustrated about this meta are people who are actually trying to win. They're the people who are like doing decently in the arena, soft infinite players, or like I guess X soft infinite or infinite players. These days, it's pretty hard to be a true infinite player in this meta. Um, it's the way the structure is set up, and if you're a game designer, you don't really want things to get here. And of course, things got here because there's no one designing Arena. Like, it's not like any of the Blizzard game designers looked at it and like said, "I want Arena to be like this." So that thought isn't even in there. It's not like they messed up the thought, right, and implemented it poorly. Although they did implement it poorly too, but it doesn't matter. Even if they implemented it well, same result, right? This is just what happens. This is a fundamental problem with adding so many old sets in. It's exasperated right now because we just had a recent quality bump in cards, and they're adding together these very powerful dragon synergies on top of it, which are some of the most powerful things in Arena historically, if not just the most powerful historical package that's ever been in the Arena, the dragon package. So by adding that and having very few old sets compared to the new sets, this is inevitable. This is not fixable.
Yep. Okay, let's go to one other aspect that I think, if you are annoyed, this is one of the reasons why you are annoyed. Um, Predictability is at an all-time low. And predictability, there's two aspects to it. Number one, it's how much you are able to predict. Like, for example, you think you are ahead on cards, they play Raid Boss Onyxia or Ysera, and that could be like a 5-for-1 or 6-for-1, right? Like that's not even an exaggeration. It could be like a 5-for-1 or 6-for-1 thing. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that sucks, but like, and the second part is, do you even have the ability to predict, right? To sort of like care. It doesn't even matter if like it never mattered in the first place, and why are you thinking about it? And that kind of stems from you playing this vanilla stuff, right? You play this vanilla stuff, and you're just like, well, it doesn't matter. Like if they have a flame strike, I lose. It's like if they have it, I lose. If they don't have it, well, I kind of still lose if I don't sort of like play into it. So that just kind of sucks because people want predictability and the ability for them to, have the space and the space in order to predict, right? Once again, let's go back to the Scholomance meta and talk about why this is important. If you remember in the Scholomance meta, there were plenty of times in which you were just like, okay, because I have the fishy flyers, because I have this generation or something, do I do my mage scribe, put down the mage cry, play a small spell right now, or because I don't know what I'm gonna get, and also I'm just putting down a singular body, and then like it's a little bit unsafe. Do I just play the smug senior and then I do this, or maybe I play my fishy and just remove and don't do that yet? One of them is going to be a better choice than the others. And if you make a wrong move there, hey, look, at least you thought, at least in from your point of view, you had the ability to make that sort of choice. So you had the choice in your hand, and you had the space in order to make that choice. That is missing now. So the sort of objective predictability is down, but also just the space for you to actually predict, that's also lower, and that just kind of feels bad. People want to play, right? This is why people like sort of generating, from Wand Thief, from Mage Scribe, and I understand if I see you being like, actually, Merps, I kind of hate that. To be fair, I kind of hate that too, to that degree, right? Like I don't like Mage Scribe being in the meta, but I think a lot of people enjoyed that, and they want to generate, they want to have that choice. There was a lot of space within like the previous meta compared to this meta, in which, if you remember, you had that like opportunity. You're like, oh, okay, do I generate now? Do I tempo? Do I taunt? Do I remove? There was a lot of kind of decisions there, and one of them was going to be better than the rest. And it's sort of like, oh, it was rewarding that this worked out. Or even if you lost, hopefully you say to yourself, damn, that was too greedy. Or, I shouldn't have thrown so many minions out there. And now a lot of the time it's like, okay, well, I only have this one play and it really sucks. Or no matter what, I don't have initiative, so I can't remove that thing. So I'm just going to flood out onto the board, and if they have it, they have it. So that's another aspect that, once again, in the grand big umbrella, just makes you feel bad, right? You have less of these plays, you just can't predict it as much. So once again, I'm just trying to break it down, compartmentalize, vocalize exactly why people are not liking it, because we can just sit here and say, oh, this meta sucks, which I think everybody will be like, yeah, and we can all be like the seagulls from Finding Nemo and just like mine, and just like be that horde. But if we want to communicate to Blizzard, I think saying things like this are going to be more helpful. Exactly expressing why this is not just us being like every meta sucks and let's apply it to this one. There are certain special things about this meta that make it stand out more so than other metas.
Yeah, but that's assuming Blizzard can do anything with this information, which they can't. I mean, imagine you're a Blizzard dev right now. What are you going to do with this information?
Yeah,
nothing.
So,
you could fix the epic bug. That's not going to make things better. Right, that's what a lot of people are complaining about. It's really not going to make things that much better. I'm just telling you right now, it's going to make things a tiny bit better, but not in the ways that super matter. You can let's say they had a button to push. The button's almost already pushed because just like by pure luck, right? Like the classes are kind of even in that sense, and there's enough RNG to push the top classes down. So even if they had a button to push, it's not going to do all that much. You can ban cards. Would this meta really be better if your Onyxias and your Alexstraszas are banned? A very tiny bit better, because I'm not losing to Onyxia that often. I'm almost never losing to Onyxia. Right? Like, how often do you lose to Onyxia?
Drafted ones, you mean?
Yeah, drafted ones.
Yeah.
You know what? How often do you lose to discovered Onyxias? I rarely lose to discovered Onyxias either. Even though they appear 4 times as often as drafted Onyxias or something like that. I forget the exact
Yes, I lose to them a decent amount. But I mean, well, here's the thing. Like, if you put all dragons together, I lose to a lot, right? Onyxia,
you can't put all dragons together because a quarter of the meta is dragons. That's not fair. That's the whole feature of this meta, right? It's a dragon meta. But I'm talking about the individual cards that they would have a possibility to ban.
I lose to Raid Boss and Onyxia. Like, okay, if a run goes like 7 wins,
no. If on the average, let's say, well, what's your win rate this meta?
Now it's like 6.
Okay,
like
so every 9 games, how many times do you lose to a Onyxia?
Like once.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
it's like half for me.
No. And I think if you ask other people, they're much closer to where I'm at. And also, I watch way too much of the Boomer, right? No, he loses to Raid Boss and Onyxia a lot as well.
Okay, but I just mean your experience, right? Like,
yeah.
I have not had that experience in this meta where I'm losing to Raid Boss and Onyxia all the time. But like, if you ban that card, they'll have another pick of another legendary, and there will be some % chance of whatever, right? And then you have to ban that card from the Discover pool. It's like, as a Blizzard dev, you don't have levers. They're not built into the game. You can't create them in a fast way. There's nothing you can do. So, like, I understand you're trying to, like, tell Blizzard why this sucks, and, I'm sure they're more interested in that than just people saying it sucks, but there's still nothing they can do. Like, there's going to be a disconnect between you providing information and whether that information can actually be helpful, And as far as this meta is concerned, it can't be helpful. There is no way for Blizzard to make this a healthy meta. That's what we heavily suspected before this meta came about, once we found out what sets are coming in, and that hasn't changed.
I think if we're talking about ways that Blizzard can try to solve it, first of all, let's toss out some ways that from our knowledge, seems to not be possible. So first of all, adjustments are just not possible right now, right? So we take that off the table.
Hmm.
Yes, it like we would love for them to take away stuff from discovers, but I don't think that is really possible. I don't know if like
At least they haven't done it yet,
they
right?
haven't
Like,
done it, right? They like so I don't I'm just gonna assume that something is not possible if they've never done it before, right?
mhm.
And I think the easiest way, I'm not saying this is easy, I'm saying the easiest way would be, and it was kind of hinted at, and at least explored a tiny bit by Ixar and Cora on Twitter, whether jokingly or not, but it was kind of serious. It wasn't all a joke. And that would be a curated list of cards that are available, a cube draft. But really
Yeah.
a curated list.
Yeah, so
It would
that
be
is
the
not the
simplest way.
rotation system. This is what I mean
It's
because
no, it's
the
not.
whole problem is that we have these old sets coming in, and a curated list just gets rid of the ideas of these sets, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe they just curate from the set, but now you're missing. You've solved your problem of needing to play with these old cards that don't belong in the game anymore, and or also these new cards that just don't belong in the arena. Period. Ever. And you can chop a little bit off the top and chop a lot off the bottom, and you'll have a much better meta. Like I totally agree with that. But
Yep.
then you're not in the meta. You know what I mean? This is not a way to fix the meta. This is a way to change the entire meta by putting new sets in, right? Because how else would you fix the meta? Just do a new rotation, right? Just do a standard rotation. That'll fix the meta. I'm not saying Arena is never fixable from this point forward, but I'm saying they can't have these kinds of wild rotations
No,
if
they
they
absolutely
don't
can't.
work anymore. And
Uh,
they barely worked. I would say they didn't even work for the meta before that, but they at least sort of held together, and this one just exasperated things into a whole new level.
this is one of just the worst combinations. You have some of the strongest. Each set that comes out, we're going to be introduced to stronger and stronger cards. That's just the way it is. That's
Hmm.
just the way it kind of has to be by their design. And if stuff comes back, like for example, Black Rock Mountain, with the exception of a few cards in there, and older, like any sort of old set, it's going to look really bad. We cannot have Worgen Greaser be in the meta. That is not a pick. You might as well just like if the devs were to introduce a mechanic and it's like, oh hey, randomly for like 20% of all of your pick slots, they'll just be blacked out, right? How do you feel about that? Do you feel good about getting RNG'd out of like those picks? That would feel terrible, right? But that's essentially what's happening whenever you see a working greaser.
Hmm.
And sometimes you will actually just kind of, I mean, the interesting picks are when all three of your slots are like blacked out, right?
Hmm.
And
And
it
that
feels
happens a
that
couple
way.
times every draft.
Right. And it feels really terrible. It feels really, really bad. So I'm not saying it's easy, but yes, the only way to kind of save us from this meta is to change the meta. And the easiest way to completely change the meta is a curated card list. And I don't know the best way for them to do it because let's face it, Blizzard doesn't have a great track record of determining the power level of cards. Like I don't know if it would be the same person who made the buckets. Hopefully not, because we can't have somebody thinking Nightcrawler is like one of the best cards in the game. That's just not like you can't do that. I don't know if you want to toss it to some like content creators. If you want to do a community kind of vote, and the community will vote in some meme cards, and that's fine, right? You can have some meme cards. You just can't have like too many 4 mana 4/4, 6 mana 6/6s, all of that stuff. I don't know what the best way to do it, but it would be better than what we have right now, and I think it would smooth everything out a little bit more, right? Like I also would not love a kind of set or rotation in which we only have the strongest cards. I feel fine tossing stuff in. And my personal view, and I hope that like a lot of people agree with me, is like, we got to get like the Worgen Greasers out, but something like a SI7 Infiltrator, that could stay in, right? Like that's great. That's fantastic. It's like a vanilla thing with a slight upside. That's great. It's not the best and most powerful thing in the meta anymore by far, but like yeah, like let's get more cards like SI7 infiltrators, but you just can't have the greasers.
So their problem is, and this is why wild rotate, like if you go back to why wild rotations exist in the first place and why we're not just in the standard meta, is because we were in the standard meta and people complained. And that's why we got the wild meta. So things can be interesting. And then we went back to the standard meta for whatever reason. And then people complain again. And so we got back to the wild meta. And every single time we go back to the wild meta, things are a mess. And every time we're in the standard meta, things are a mess for a bit, but then they get better. Like on average, when you're in the standard meta, the power levels are more even, and you have a playable meta, and you are more in control of it because at least you have part of the design philosophy kicking in. The problem with the wild meta is that there is no design philosophy kicking in, not even on a constructed level, on no level, right? So when you do a curated list, you're essentially having a wild meta. But if you think back to why the wild meta even existed, and still exists now, is that you have to keep changing it. And there's a reason why the wild meta kicks out almost all of the sets every rotation, rather than just one set or two set. It's because that's what Blizzard determined that people actually want. And in fact, if you go read up on any comment threads debating the standard and wild meta, that is what people want. That's even what good players want. I don't know why. I've always been a huge supporter of the standard meta and a huge anti of wild rotations, even from the very beginning. But I know you like the wild rotations at least a bit, Mervs, and I know that most of the arena community likes the wild rotations. But it's a built-in problem, because once you go into this box kind of rotation set, first of all, you still got to cram the right amount of cards in there, right? Or else you're going to get 4 copies of every card. So I don't know, count up all the cards that they put in right now, and have that be like their floor, their estimate for how many cards is good to have in the box. Then you have to rotate something like, well, first of all, you can't put all of those in, right? Because the whole point is to get rid of a lot of the bad cards, and then maybe some good problematic cards. So you have maybe 75% of the cards in, and then you have to rotate maybe 75% of that every 2 months. So there's a whole system to set up here that goes significantly beyond people just sitting there and be like, which cards are good in the arena? Let's put that, into a box. There is an upkeep element. They have to keep switching around. And whenever they switch it around, which will be once every 2 months, or I think people want to even potentially quicker than that, nobody will know what's going on anymore. Because at least now with a set, I can say, I remember Ungoro. I know generally what's in Ungoro. I don't have to actually sit there and go through 130 cards before the meta comes out to be like, oh, this is what's in Ungoro. I certainly don't have to go back and do that with every single one of the 5 sets that are switching, right? And the one set that's staying the same. I don't have to do that because these sets have names, they have identities. I remember, and I have a crap memory, and you guys know this, and I still remember the vast majority of stuff that's going on in each of the sets. Once you go into these kind of box sets and you're still switching out 75% of the cards, which you have to keep things interesting, according to Blizzard, according to the arena community, you're going to get chaos. It's going to be impossible to keep track of unless you're the most dedicated of the most dedicated players. This isn't like a magic bullet solution. And to the extent that this is a magic bullet solution, this isn't the easiest solution, because the even easier solution to that is just to make a standard. It's already extra work to make it into a box format. And once you make it into a box format, you have to upkeep it, whereas standard upkeeps itself. So, I don't know. I think the easiest way, and this is because I have extremely low expectations of Blizzard. You mentioned, what about, the people who don't know, how good cards actually are in the arena? Let's not have them do that. But who are those people? And who are the people that actually know what's going on in arena at Blizzard, right? And do you trust Blizzard to identify the correct people who should be doing this? Do you trust the people that actually could, have the skills to do this, actually want to do this? I think until they actually blow up the arena, which I assume they're going to do sometime in the next year or so, and replace it with whatever new arena is going to be, you should just let Blizzard use the least amount of effort on this as possible and just focus on making things playable, which is what they're failing at, the making things playable part. And so the box is not the easiest solution. The easiest solution is standard. It's not the most exciting solution, but it does change every 2 months because there will be a set that is added in, and it will change at least slightly. And standard, especially now, when we know what wild is, standard looks better than ever. Like, just put us back into the ridiculous swings. Because at least then everyone has the same swings. Is it a better meta than we had like 3 years ago? No, it's not a better meta than that. But it's a much better meta than this one. And we've already talked about how this meta can't be fixed. So, while I would like to imagine a world in which Blizzard can actually put together a box format, change it every 2 months, and still keep it interesting and still keep it roughly balanced, I have no faith in this. So, why spend the effort, from Blizzard's perspective even, when standard should work perfectly okay to just keep things moving along until they actually come up with the solution that will actually attract new players and like actually be really good and whatever else.
I think people would be fine with standard. People would prefer it. People would prefer a lot of things over
people prefer anything over this right now. Okay, so that's the meta. I want to get deep into the meta now instead of just analyzing what is wrong with the meta. I want to talk about, because there's two things, right? You talk about everything. This works in life too. You talk about everything from a game designer perspective, but ultimately you're not the game designer. You're not the game designer of Hearthstone Arena. You're not the game designer of life or whatever society you live in. You're just a player. And as a player, if you choose to continue being a player, which again, you don't have to, you could skip the meta. This was one of the most understandable metas to skip. But if you want to be a player in this meta, there's certain things you could do to make your life less horrible and to make your win rates either a little more consistent or a little better. And I want to attack that a little bit. We're not going to get super deep into it because it's really not, like, this is not one of those metas where your actual actions have that much input, or even your drafting has that much input to the wins that you get compared to even a normal meta, not like a good meta in the arena. But there's still things you can do. And what I want to focus about is the first big observation for this meta. Onyxian Warder. Onyxian Warder's win rate right now is 58.2%. Knight Captain's 58.5%. We are very, very certain always of Knight Captain's tier list rating for us, which should be a B+. And so that should mean Onyxian Warder should be like a B, and we rated it a C. And that is because we heavily underestimated the amount of dragons that are in your hand, and I think we fell into a trap too in our analysis that dragons just stay in your hand. They don't get played out. A lot of them are really big, and so they're not actually following the normal rules of cards to get played out. But that's a smaller part. The bigger part really is that there's more dragons in this meta than we expected. And you can tell that that's the case. I'm not just making this up, because the fourth best non-dragon synergy card, the fourth best one in neutral, is frickin' Scale Rider. This is right next to, and when I say non-dragon synergy card, I mean I even count like Twin Tyrant. I even count dragons as being non-dragon synergy. I just mean things that don't explicitly say, like Scale Rider, Battle Cry. If you are holding a dragon, do X, right? So if you just took a look at all those cards, the fourth one is Scale Rider. And this card is not good. This is the fourth best neutral. Okay, not the fourth best neutral, the sixth best neutral. I skipped the fifth best neutral. I skipped over an epic card, Bright Eyed Scout. Okay, But it is the 5th best neutral, and it is Scale Rider. It's a 3 mana 3/3, so it's almost never a curve card. And it has Battle Cry. If you're holding a dragon, deal 2 damage. So for getting 2 more damage, it loses 1 stat. And that's not good. So now, if you look at Onyxia Warder, for getting 4 damage, you lose 2 stats, right? Because Onyxia Warder is a 5 mana 3/6. Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, summon 2/2/1 wolves with Rush. And you have a much better chance to be able to play this on curve because you have 2 more turns to get a dragon in your hand that you don't play out. Or draw cards or whatever. So if you had told me before this meta started that Scale Rider was going to be the 5th best neutral that doesn't have a dragon synergy with it, I would have been like, oh my god, Onyxia Warder is going to be really good in this meta then, right? Because it's all linked, it's all connected, it's arena, everything's on a string. So in this meta, Onyxia Warder is at least a B, probably a B+. And in this meta, what this also means is that there are a lot of dragons, and all the dragon synergies are doing really, really well.
Well, so here's the thing about everything being on a string and kind of... So it's like a mini version of what we talked about in kind of like last week, in which like, oh, is Drakefire Amulet really good? It's like, well, yes, but no, and then it's more complex than that, right? Something that like I didn't really anticipate with Onyxian Warder is how much you should, as in it is correct for you to do, potentially go down in value by a little bit, even if you don't have the Warder in your draft yet. Like it's only pick like 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to go down in value a little bit to pick. I'm not, obviously it's not even like a Primordial Drake, and you're just like, oh man, I guess I got to pick a Primordial. It's like you picking a Volcanic Drake, right?
Yeah.
Or you picking the Kobold Dragon over something actually like pretty decent, or you picking like the 4 mana 3/5 dragon over like something around the same, or even a little bit better.
Yeah, the
right?
4 mana 3/5 dragon is doing really well.
Yes.
By win percentage, even though it
it's
still
a
sucks.
dragon. It is a dragon.
It is just a dragon that is also a curve card, even though it's a bad curve card.
A dragon. Right. It is.
Like, the ability is not being triggered, in case people are like, oh, maybe this ability is becoming relevant. No. The ability is not really any more relevant than it used to be. But it is a dragon.
Yeah. So, one of the things that happens when the meta is this bad, as in your cards are just that bad, is that you should go down in value to get those dragons. So like, because typically the way that you would rate a card like this is like, okay, if you draft just like, it's like, okay, I picked the better card, like just from the card itself, and then once you get to like the middle of the draft where you, let's say, see the Warden, it's not worth it to pick up anymore, or if you pick it up, like it's very catalytic, right, in one way or another. But now it's like, it is actually correct for you to pick the 4 mana 3/5 dragon before you even have the Warder, as long as it's like somewhat close. Just get the dragon, right? Get the dragon, good things will happen. Because that swing is just that important right now. Like, those swings are just that good. So, once again, this is the thing. And I see the comment in chat as well. They're like, oh, like, you were kind of like, if not down, being like, oh, like, it's 2022, why does it have more stats? And they're like, well, it's just amazing as is. No, it's
because
amazing.
of the dragons.
It's because of the dragons, and the fact that you should go down in value to take dragons because the meta is so shit, and you having that swing is so much more impactful. Just, as an example, if you still had the same number of dragons, but something like Scholomance was in, so once again, I'm not taking your dragon. So look, you still have the same percentage of dragons. But you also have the stall generation and all of that stuff from the Scholomance as well. It's nowhere near as good, right?
Yeah.
Like nowhere near as good. It's just the meta is so shit right now. And also, so we talk about epics being very, very good, right? Um, what happens because epics are very, very good for mage? What happens with the epic bug in general? Because this isn't something that we talk about, like we talked so much about last week. Um, I don't want you guys to think that like, oh, it's like so that just means spammy is up, right? And it just means like everybody has removal now. No, that's not what it means. Everybody has weird cards. Everybody is looking for some sort of swing. You are sometimes forced to play normal, but what will end the game, and this is why people are frustrated, are these random ass swings, right? How many times do you play normal? You play normal, and then you play your Storm 1 champion, and you're just like, I have no choice, and you might think about BGH in the back of your head.
Yeah, but you still do it. That's the correct
But you still
move.
do it, and they BGH you.
Yes.
It's too much to overcome. You lose. And so it's like, is it about swings? Yes. Very much so about swings, but totally different from the Scholomance, where, you had choices. You can swing it back and forth, right? Like, it's you going, your opponent going, you going, your opponent going. Just these singular swings are very important. And it's not about you punching back after they punch. It's about just you punching, and then everybody is kind of like, just gets knocked out by something like that now. So it's so interesting what the epic bug does, because it makes some classes much better than others, but it also combined with these bad sets, right? And everything is tied together. There's all a spider web of stuff. You combine the bad cards with the increased epics, so you just have all this weird shit running around, like, and then you have BGHs and you have the spammies as well. But the meta isn't full of them, right? It's not it is not the meta that we had before, in which you could see these, or more often see these battles of like, I remove, you remove. It's like, I set up, they remove again, I remove, I draw, I generate, they draw, they generate, we remove each other, and then somebody eventually wins, right? It's these singular kind of big swings, and you just have to, we talked about Knight Captain. You just got to hit that one Knight Captain for you to get like significantly ahead. You just got to hit that one warder, and you're significantly ahead. And yes, you will remember the games in which it's like, oh, but they played the Onyxia or everything. But like, man, if you just look at the times that the Knight Captain hits, the warder hits, and the pressure that generates immediately for most decks out there, it's crazy. It's so crazy, and that's why warder, it is worth for you to invest in something like that, because it's a vanilla meta that still relies on swings. I think that is a great way to put it. Yeah. It is a vanilla meta that is very swing oriented, but you oftentimes don't get the ability to punch back, and that is really crappy. But it also means like, yeah, draft a warder, reach, quote unquote, for the dragons, but it's not even a reach, right? Like, if you're doing
so
this,
here's I'll tell you the exact line of the reach and when you should reach for a dragon. You should reach for a dragon if the cards you were going to pick is worse than a Yeti anyway. Yeti is the line. Because you can talk about all the swings in this meta, but there are so many bad cards, and the only way to win this game that does not revolve around you having the most insane cards and also being able to draw them is to actually push tempo and get face damage early.
Yeah.
That is the only way to win. And we said this last week, and I'll say it again here. Yeti's win rate is at like a historic high for the last 4 years. There is no meta that I can remember in my mind in the last 4 years that is better for a Yeti than this one. And you would think, wait, hold up. That means we're all on the ground doing these little mini trades and getting little bits of values and having it matter, right? That's why Yeti's good, right? No, that's not what's happened. What's instead happened is that the Yetis allow you to do the thing that you need to do to win, which is to be able to generate a little bit extra tempo and then push to the face. because this game doesn't really end on like turn like 6 or even 7 usually. This game ends on like 8 or 9. So if you just like win the game before 8 or 9, you can still win the game without a ridiculous amount of cards. And yes, you will still be wrecked sometimes by their Knight Captain that's really good. Sometimes they'll play an Onyxia Warden and get a ridiculous amount of Temple. Sometimes they have Spammy and you just lose, right? But that's a small percentage of your games. A much larger percentage of your games. If you're the one pushing and they're the one trying to get to their Onyxia, you never see their Onyxia. This is what I mean by I don't get beat by Onyxia. Because I win before Onyxia, or I'm already dead before they need to play Onyxia, so they're just not like slamming it maybe. I don't know. But I do not see Onyxias, because turn 9 is a very dangerous turn to be on unless you have an Onyxia, unless you have a Ysera, unless you have, Aura Mage. But if you're any other class doing any other things, like that's why Priest is so bad, right? I played a Priest run. It was so awful. Like, just you feel like you can never win. Why? Because you were still trying to get to the end game, and so if you don't have one of those ridiculous cards that you're not favored to get as Priest, you can't really do anything. You just like hang out until you die. You have 0 win conditions. Most other people just have better cards than you, and you're going to like almost the end of your deck, so they're gonna top deck their card at some point. It's a pretty terrible feeling. So that's what you should not be doing right now, right? You should not be playing as if you were a priest, even if you're not a priest. And if you look, why is Paladin all of a sudden ahead now, right? Isn't Mage the best class? Mage is still the best class for the high rolls. Mage is still the best, not even the higher. Paladin high roll is pretty high too. But Mage is the best class for that playstyle where you hang around, do nothing, and you let your good cards win, and it requires very minimal amounts of skill. Right? Everything's reactive, everything's waiting. The more cards everybody sees, the better, because the higher percent odds you have of seeing all of your good cards. And then throw some RNG into it on top of that. But Paladin not only has some good top-end cards, but also is good at getting that early game tempo, which prevents it from dying in the early game, and allows it a good base to push the mage in the early game. Like, this is why Paladins are doing so well now, and this is why if you track the win rate of something like Spammy, it's going down from the first week. Because in the first week, everyone's like, what? Spammy? And now people are like, I'm thinking some people are playing around it. I still don't play around Spammy, at least until turn 7, but usually just like never. But it's less effective than it was when it was surprising everybody, because it's no longer a surprise now. You're kind of expecting it. Usually you can't play around it, right? Almost always you can't play around it, but sometimes you can, and so Spammy's win rate's going down because of it. So all of this like pushing thing for the early part of the meta means Yeti is up, Spider Tank is up, Croc is up. What's a super important card in your deck right now if you are not a mage and or don't have ridiculous cards? River Croc. Pick your freaking River Crocs. And what happens if you get below that River Croc line? That's when you want to start getting the dragons. That's when you want to start investing in any possible synergies for swings whatsoever, right?
Yep.
Dragons are the easiest one because everyone has access to them and they're quite good. But classes have their own synergies too, right? Or you may have just happened to draft a card that could start a chain of synergies. Go for them. When cards are bad, like Merp says, when general quality of cards are bad, it makes more sense to go for it. Just don't go for it unless you've fallen below the perfectly good, even in this meta line, which the Yeti is on. It's above. Mostly because that's how you win with a subpar deck. And if you have a good deck, right, like, your one is that you're fine just doing a normal drafting strategy. You don't have to do anything like special or whatever. But also, two, recognize that oftentimes you're still going to lose because it's all based on RNG and card draw these days. So you could have the good cards, you just don't draw them. You draw your crappy cards. But what are you going to do? But yeah,
yep.
So it's that line, it's that tension, right? You need to set up for your Onyxian Warders in the draft, but you also need to make sure you have your Crocs, you have your Spider Tanks, you have your Yetis, because that's how you lose less.
Yep. And let me tell you guys, we're talking a lot about swings, and some of you might be thinking it's like, well, for those lucky individuals who get enough dragons, For those like luck boxes who are able to draft the BGHs and have it hit. Look for swings wherever you can. I can tell you right now. Do you know what card I think is being slept on? And certainly, whenever I watch um, some streams, I think they underrate it. Crazed Alchemist. I think Crazed Alchemist
Mm-hmm.
is great in this meta.
And Kooky Chemist is in this meta too.
I know, but people have always thought Kuki was
Okay.
great, right? Like, or if not great, like very good. But no, like Crazed Alchemist. Oh man, whenever I see that, I'm like, so good. Like, if not a premium card, then like one that I'm very, very happy to take. Because those are the swings that you're looking for, right? Like, I want that 2 mana. I will say most of the time it's better than a 2 mana Dark Iron Dwarf. For the stats, right? 2 mana for 2/2, 4 mana for 4/4, and it's even much better because there's just polarized things, and you want to bust that expectation of either the damage that you can deal or how stable slash fragile their own minions are.
Mm-hmm.
Look for those.
Like,
I don't think there has been a better meta for something like a Crazed Alchemist.
like Crazed Alchemist win rate for like slightly above average players is almost as good as a Yeti. And Crazed Alchemist is a card that will get better the better you are, because it has more potential uses if you're on the board than if you're not on the board, right? And for those who are like, oh my god, I take every BGH ever, it's the best card in the game. These are above average players that are getting these HS replay stats. And obviously BGH is worse the better of a player you are. So if you're better than like a 4.5 win player, BGH's win rate is like a tiny bit above Yeti right now. It's the same as like a nesting row, which I'm surprised is at such a high win rate, to be honest. But
A taunt is important.
yeah, I mean,
Like,
taunts are
that-
very
that
important
taunt
now,
is very important.
and there's not that many taunts in this meta. But they're also around the same level as the 4 mana 3/5 dragon that we keep talking about, Dragonkin Sorcerer. Dragonkin Sorcerer's win rate is better than a Yeti.
Yeah.
It's the same essentially as a big game hunter. This is the meta we're in. Like, yeah, it's very tilted, but don't like look at bit like I don't want people, especially good players, right? If you're like a average player, like fine, big game hunter is actually probably quite good, but if you're if you're like a above average player, don't fall into the trap of thinking big game hunter is actually like a really good card. It's like kind of an average card to like maybe a little bit above average card in your deck. Like, it's fine. And when people complain about it, they're just complaining about the fact that it's a giant swing. But it's not, like I keep saying this, 4 mana is Assassinate, 4 mana is Big Game Hunter. This is an Assassinate with a condition, and you also get 6 stats on the board. That's not like a ridiculously weird or whatever card. Like, I don't think this is worthy of all the complaints that this card gets. Like, I don't know. But either way, right, even if you think that the swing is just so big and whatever, it's not that good of a card. It's worse than like an Elven Archer. Like an Annoyotron. A Friendly Bartender. I'm like just listing cards that beat it in stats. Definitely worse than a Mad Bomber. Oh, so much worse than a Grim Necromancer. Like, I'm just naming totally normal cards that you wouldn't be like, oh my god, this is so much better than a BGH. It is. It really is.
All right. I think that's enough about the meta. Once again, I think it's important whenever the community complains about something to be able to vocalize it in certain ways. You don't want to just say it's the worst meta and just get out your pitchforks. It's very important to identify what makes this meta different. What are the factors that we want to avoid in the future to have these sorts of complaints? And what can we potentially do to make things better? So, yeah, I'm hoping that we can just have more nuanced conversations about this. These days, I don't post on Arena HS anymore, really, but I do read what's going on there. I check in every now and again. So, if you do visit there, if you can direct the conversation towards, talking about specific attributes or characteristics of the meta instead of just saying, well, this sucks. Or, I go on there as well and I just see it's like, oh, mages are the reason that I hate this meta so much. Dragons, just in general, are the reason that I hate the meta so much. That's not accurate. It's not. Like, you have misidentified.
I think dragons is still pretty accurate.
Yeah, but not in the way that you're thinking about. Like, yes, but no. So because we know that Blizzard does read, like, not just Arena HS, like they compile sort of like they've confirmed this before. They compile stuff from social media and Reddit and everywhere just to get a pulse on things. So if you're just like, well, it's pointless, it could be, but at least they read it. So definitely keep the conversation alive, and the most important thing is like nuance, right? Like let's bust through this, whether they actually believe it or not, this perception that it's like, oh, Arena people will just keep on complaining about whatever, like there'll always be something to complain about. And it's like, well,
like, honestly, for the past like 2.5 to 3 years, we've been really, like, I think definitely on average more positive than negative. If you just like tick off each podcast and go like, are they overall positive about the what's happening or overall negative? I think we've been 50% plus positive compared to negative. I know we're not like the only voice in the Arena community, but I feel like we are normally seen as one of the more complaining ones. We haven't been that complaining, but sometimes things are bad. I mean, oftentimes things are bad. That's why I drew the line at 50%.
I think it's easier to paint people as more critical or more complaining if they're talking about it for an hour. I mean, yeah, that's just the way it is, right? But like, other people are unhappy, and their level of unhappiness might even exceed ours, because let's face it, they got to play it more. But it's like, they're not breaking it down, and it's like, okay, these are exactly the reasons, and blah blah, and then it's like, okay, well, they're not talking about it for an hour straight, so obviously they're happy about it, right? It's like, I don't think so. I don't think so. And in fact,
we know so. We're not guessing here. We talk to these people and we watch them and we listen to them, and then also people come into our chat and tell us what these people think too. So I think we have a pretty good pulse, just even like passively, about where at least the most frequent Arena streamers are on any particular meta.
All right. So I think that's enough. We've talked about it more. If nothing happens, I don't know what more there is to say about it. For example, the next week, we haven't even touched on BGs yet, in which BGs is not in a great state. I
told you
earlier on today.
This is where I want to point and be like, event meta. I told you so.
Well, no, I mean, this is exactly what I said would happen. I'm like, they don't change.
I don't mean like you, as in like you specifically, like, Merps. I mean you, as in like all the people who are so positive about this whole buddy thing, because people are very positive about this.
I don't know how many people were, but they were positive about. It's like, oh, new stuff. I think almost everybody identified. It's like, okay, they're gonna balance it, right? It's like that meme, like that Star Wars meme, and you have like Natalie Portman. It's like, oh, but you're gonna balance it, right? And Blizzard just like silence, like you're gonna.
But like, I was pretty sure that they can't balance it, and I don't know why people thought they were gonna balance it, because again, they can't balance it. It's not like Blizzard's just not trying to balance it. It's like Blizzard's in there doing their own stuff and being like, oh, we can't do anything about it. How could this have happened? Why was this not foreseeable? I'm sure somebody raised it, and they were like, nah, we'll figure it out when we get there. Anyway, this is on the BG side. This is my big "I told you so" to the whole BG community that was like, "Oh, this is generally a positive thing. Things are going to be good if they do these. If they do these things, right? Like, if they do A, B, and C." And I'm sitting there being like, "Okay, well, A has a 25% chance of happening. B has a 2% chance of happening, and C can't possibly happen. Even like we even know this before it launches. So why are you saying this is going to be great if A, B, and C?" That's what I feel like the whole BG community was doing when this whole thing was launching, and I'm like, these are very unrealistic expectations. But I don't know, maybe these people have inside information and they really think Blizzard's going to do all this, but I don't see it happening. And I assume that Blizzard cares a lot about BGs, right? Like, and they've shown that they cared a lot about BGs. Even then, I just don't think it's within the capabilities of a game designer. Like, generally, right? Like, not just Blizzard. Like, it was a tall ask for fixes in such a short period of time. Anyway, we can talk about BGs next week if you want, or we can just...
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Until then, and hopefully there's an arena patch coming or a hotfix on the epic bug or whatever. Like, at this point, I think it's just, even if they just fix the epic bug, it doesn't make things that much better. It'll at least be a different meta. So it'll at least like be a little more interesting for like a week, and it'll hopefully fix it going forward too. So I think it's a worthy investment of their time, right? But anyway, until next week, this is Adwikta.
This is Merpsy, guys.